terrifying circumstances on the islands that you just stand and wonder. But he was leaving a very fruitful ministry. He was a success. If anybody would look at him and say, you got an anointing for urban ministry, brother. Nobody's been able to do for decades in Glasgow what you have done. And he walked away from it. And he got stiff criticism for it. He said, the opposition was so strong from nearly all, and many of them warm Christian friends, that I was sorely tempted to question whether I was carrying out the divine call or only some headstrong wish of my own. This also caused me much anxiety and drove me close to God in prayer. First act of courage, to handle that kind of criticism and stand by his sense of God's call. Second, he had courage to risk losing his loved ones and press on when he did in fact lose them. He married just before he left, his early 30s. There's a lot of details, by the way, left out that just are maddening. You want to know, I do not know how many children Paton had. I know he had at least 6, but there's nowhere he talks about them. His selectivity in writing this autobiography is frustrating to the biographer. But he had several. Anyway, he married Mary and took her on a boat 3 months to Sydney, then over to the islands. They choose the island, Tanna. Go to Tanna. They positioned him there. He built a house. Then he brought her over. February 12, 1859, the baby was born. So now they have a little one, and they're married, and the boat leaves. No telephone, no telegraph, and nobody else. Our island exile, he said, thrilled with joy, but the greatest of sorrows was treading hard upon the heels of my great joy. Mary had repeated attacks of ague, fever, pneumonia, diarrhea. Quote, then in a moment, altogether unexpectedly, she died on March 3rd. So this is 4 months after he's there. To crown my sorrows and complete my loneliness, the dear baby boy, whom we had named after her father, Peter Robert Robeson, was taken from me after 1 week's sickness on the 20th of March. Let those who have ever passed through any similar darkness as of midnight feel for me. As for all others, it would be more than vain to try to paint my sorrows. He dug the graves with his own hands. He put them in at the end of his house. And he said, my reason seemed for a time almost to give way. But for Jesus and the fellowship he vouchsafed to me there, I must have gone mad and died beside that lonely grave. Now, the two aspects of courage here are, one, to risk that happening. Her parents never recovered from that. He met them when he went back 4 years later. They never recovered. They died from that blow. And so you can imagine the kind of criticism that would begin to crop up. You took my daughter. You took my daughter. I've had a man threaten my life from outside this church for sending his son overseas. He said to me, if anything happens to him, you will pay. The courage then to go on after it happens is a great courage. And he went on. He went on. 4 years beside that grave, alone with Abraham, his Antinomese convert, servant, helper, who was wonderfully trustworthy. He fought the battle alone to preach the gospel among the cannibals. Number 3, he had courage to risk his own sickness in a foreign land with no doctors and no escape. Fever and ague, he said, attacked me 14 times severely. He never knew. Picture it now. You have no hospitals, you have no doctors, you do have some primitive medicines with you, and you get sick with the same thing your wife died of, and you watched her die, and you buried her with your own hands. And you never know, 14 times, and you don't know which one is going to be your time. Do you not go mad? Do you not quit after the 3rd or 4th or 5th or 13th time and say, that's enough? And he didn't. He just kept on going and going and going. And those dangers were not just in the first 4 years on Tanna. Here's what he wrote. 15 years later, there was another wife, Margaret. He married went back home, and he had another child. And this is what he wrote. During the hurricanes of January, April 1873, when the Dayspring, the mission ship, was wrecked, we lost our darling child by death. My dear wife had a protracted illness, and I was brought very low with severe rheumatic fever and was reported as dying. So it isn't as though he passed through a season of serious suffering in the first 4 years and then triumphant conversion of Aniwa. He wrote the line, our struggles were strangely mingled all through life with successes and difficulties. It was a strange mingling. Number 4, the most common demand for courage was the almost constant threat to his life from the hostilities of these natives. And what makes this autobiography so thrilling, it's like a thriller to read, is because of his report of so many crisis situations into which he was brought and out of which the Lord brought him. One crisis after the other. And one wonders how he kept his mind from snapping. I've been in only a very few situations where there have been death threat phone calls or somebody hollering obscenities outside your house or some gunshots, and the thing that has happened inside of my stomach and my chest at those moments, when it's not surrounded by 500 people with machetes, it's just, you're not sure what it is. I just want, how in the world do you keep your mind from just going snap? And then to have it happen over and over, and there are no weekend getaways. There are no restaurants. There's no bed and breakfast. There's nothing but more of it tomorrow morning. Never knowing whether if you walk down to the water place, somebody would kill you, or if you did anything. It's constant tension. The spring never has a chance to unwind. How in the world, but for sovereign, miraculous grace upon grace, way beyond anything any of us carries into it, could it last? And that's the way he lived for these 4 years on Tanna. He wrote, our continuous danger caused me now oftentimes to sleep with my clothes on, that I might start at a moment's warning. My faithful dog, Clutha. This is a great theme running through the first volume. Clutha. I love Clutha. Little Scottish terrier. Saves his life over and over again. And all I can think is he must have brought him on the boat. I mean, where do you get a Scottish terrier in the New Hebrides? And Clutha, the name Clutha is the name of the boat that brought him down there. So this little dog, and it's a very poignant thing when the dog doesn't escape, when he escapes. But this dog saved his life over and over again, and he gives God the credit for it. Our continuous danger caused me often to sleep in my clothes, that I might start at a moment. My faithful dog Clutha would give a sharp bark and waken me. God made them fear this precious creature and often used her in saving my life. My enemies seldom slackened, he wrote, their hateful designs against my life. However calmed or baffled for a moment, a wild chief, for example, followed me around for hours with a loaded musket. They got muskets from the traders. In fact, one of the